A very good Friday afternoon to you. I hope I find you well. You are watching the Fixed Wing Guide channel with me, Stuart Lomas. You probably guessed what this video is about from the title. The accursed BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, or as I like to call them, the British Bullshitting Corporation. I hate this organisation for a number of reasons, but in the true spirit of English-British fairness, I will try to bring forth some of the reasons why I dislike this organisation without bringing my personal hatred and loathing of this organisation to the fore. We were cursed with the birth of the BBC on October the 18th, 1922. Now obviously at that point in time it was mostly radio based, although they were experimenting with television with John Logie Baird. The first TV sets were Baird TV sets, of course, and it was the old 30-line picture, so very, very poor quality to the 1080 line that we have these days. The very first televised play was in 1930, so that gives you a fair idea how far back production of television has gone with the BBC. My issue with the BBC, which I believe is justified in this day and age, when the BBC isn't the sole provider of televisual entertainment, everything should be pay as you buy, as it were, or pay as you consume. Notice I'm not using the word pay-per-view, because pay-per-view is a slightly different thing. The BBC pumped out for many years the staple diet of television for most people, because for most people, or certainly of my age, there was only BBC up until about 1963, 1964. There was only BBC One. Then rediffusion television came along here in Britain, which then changed its name to ATV, Associated Television, which eventually turned into ITV, Independent Television. In 1967, BBC then launched BBC Two, the first channel in Britain to show programmes in colour. So they have moved along televisual technology for quite a pace throughout their history. Now, here where my problem starts with the BBC. We are not a communist state, although we are a dictatorship, even though people believe that we do live in a democracy, and I've covered that in other videos. It isn't right, I believe, that a broadcaster should be able to enforce a payment of a subscription, which is what the license fee is, backed up by law from countless governments of the day throughout the last 70 years, with the threat that if you do not pay your license, you may well go to jail, as well as being fined £1,000. That is an archaic way of running a licensing system, and it shouldn't be able to be enforced. I've often wondered that maybe if I just gave up paying my license fee, just to see what happened, just to get some idea of how powerful the law is that the BBC seem to carry with them. I also have a major problem with the quality of programmes that the BBC puts out. Unfortunately, the rest of the world seems to be carrying this romantic notion that the BBC are this provider of high quality televisual entertainment, where in fact the BBC just produce ratings-driven talent shows like The Voice and Strictly Come Dancing, and the what seems to be daily diet of soap operas, where like EastEnders and Doctors that they show at lunchtime, and other imported nonsense from around the world. The only quality television that the BBC turn out, which is turning out to be less than once a year now, is Sherlock, in my opinion. And if they're not careful, that will be bought out by somebody else, I'm sure. To give you a basic idea of why the BBC isn't what people perceive it to be, is the income from the BBC via the licence fee in financial year 2014-2015 was 3.706 billion. Yes, you heard me right. 3.706 billion pounds. Most of that money goes on funding what they call the talent. And that is the people within their organisation, like the actors in things like soap operas, who couldn't get a proper acting job if they tried, because that is why soap actors always are and always will be soap actors, because it is all they can do. They fund people like Graham Norton, God help us. The managing directors are funded to a massive tone. Terry Wogan, who does one show a week, is on in excess of £500,000 a year. Some of the Radio 2 presenters who, in my opinion, are hardly ever there. Working for Radio 2, I've come to the conclusion, is better than being a school teacher where leave is concerned. The school teacher's 13 weeks of every week seems quite minimal compared to some of the leave that the Radio 2 presenters take. Bring into perspective who the BBC are. The BBC are not actually, in fact, just the British Broadcasting Corporation. They own BBC Worldwide. BBC Worldwide in financial year 2014-2015 brought in the measly sum of 157.4 million. 157.4 million. Now, we have to pay £147 a year. I do not watch any BBC content, none at all. I watch Sherlock on the iPlayer, which I shouldn't by law have to pay for. I subscribe to satellite television via Sky, and I pay quite happily and quite rightly for buying an independent service, but I also have to pay for the BBC. To put into perspective where else the BBC gets their funding from: BBC Films, BBC Top Gear Enterprises, BBC Wildlife, BBC brackets Demon Music, who are a music production house, the BBC Shop, the BBC Motion Gallery, the BBC Store, where they sell video games and things like To See BBs and the Children's Channel, the BBC Magazine subscription, BBC Books, and the BBC own a minority share, so they say, putting emphasis on the minority share, of Random House Books, one of the largest, if not the largest, publishing houses in the world. So the BBC seem to want to have you and I believe that they are an organisation who is surviving solely on the contributions, via the license fee, which they want to ensure carries on going up and up and up, as it has done over the last, certainly to my knowledge, 50 years, when in fact they take pride in saying that we are a non-commercial organisation, when in the light of day, as you've just heard, are quite happy to engage in commercial outlets where that will underpin the massive salaries paid to all the people who work for the BBC. If the BBC were not a commercial organisation, none of the BBC tagged organisations I've just mentioned would exist. I mean, why would they? Because, of course, they get the £147 a year from the however many households, 45 million households in the UK, and that should fund any and all production of radio and television that they throw out at us. I think the problem here is that they are depending far too much on their past reputation as being a good and worthy broadcaster. They own a company called Red Productions. Now, excuse me, Red Productions years ago, when I used to work in television, Red Productions, as the name suggests, were a production company, made lots of television programmes for lots of different broadcasters, including Coronation Street for the ITV. So, they also have, they used to have an inbuilt agency for casting extras, where before I actually did anything major, I worked as an extra on certain things, many things like, you know, Brookside and Coronation Street and Cutting It and so on and so forth, being cast by Red Productions, and all the income from that, because obviously Red charged ITV or London Weekend Television or Yorkshire Television or whoever for the casting fees, and those casting fees of course went into the coffers of the BBC. As far as the BBC itself are concerned, I'm appalled at the quality of television they put out at the moment. Is a very, very poor quality. I am not interested in watching a soap every night of the week, although I am aware that there are people out there who do watch a soap every night of every week, and I am also aware that there are people who spend 2 hours a night watching a combination maybe of 3 soaps, you know, whether it's Emmerdale or Coronation Street, Hollyoaks, and then of course the claptrap that the BBC put out, EastEnders, none of which are reflective of what real life is, I hasten to say. But where my problem really is with the BBC is that if we do live in a truly free society, we should be able to choose to pay to watch the BBC if we wish, and we are not given that freedom. I am, however, and I would like your opinions on this, I am going to investigate their laws regarding not paying the licence fee. As I understand it, if you watch television from any source other than live broadcast, which means BBC iPlayer, BBC Online, there's another business, via the planner on Sky, or your planner if you have Virgin, or if you record it on Freeview Plus or something like that. So anything that you do not watch live, be it BBC content or not, you don't have to pay for. So the way I watch television, I know that I'm not alone here, all my televisual watching is done via my Sky planner, solely because I'm fortunate enough to like quite a lot of stuff that Sky as a network buy or produce, and I have to dump it all on my planner and watch it when time allows. So I'm going to investigate this fully and find out what their rules and regulations state. I'm going to try to have a conversation with somebody at the licensing authority via email so that I have it all in writing, and should it confirm my suspicions that as long as I do not watch anything live as broadcast, so I can watch it online, I can watch it via iPlayer if it's something on the BBC on the rare occasion that I do watch, i.e. Wimbledon, for instance. If it is something I record on my planner, as long as I have that in writing via email, I am going to stop paying my license fee, because the content, let's get this right. Years ago, when Mum and Dad couldn't afford a television, to buy a television, we had a television, and on the back of the television was a box. Anybody in Britain who's as old as me, perhaps, will remember this. And you could rent a television by putting 2 shilling pieces in the box at the back and turn in the key, and that would drop it back, and that would give you a certain amount of viewing time. When that viewing time ended, the television went off, and you had to put some more money in should you want to watch any more television. Now, my theory is, with today's technology, excuse me, why could you not have a card payment system with a little box, like your bank machine when you go into the bank, attached to your television, and it was your pay-per-view payment box for BBC. If you wanted to watch BBC content, you would put your debit card in, tap your number in, and that would activate your BBC channels that you wanted to watch on that time, therefore making them, I said at the beginning of this I wasn't going to use this phrase, but in effect it will be pay-per-view. So in my case, I would win hands down by this. So pay-per-view for a fortnight watching Wimbledon, I would win hands down, because it would no way near cost me the £147 a year it currently costs me. So I am going to have this conversation with the BBC licensing. Let me know what you think about the pay-per-view idea for the BBC, and I promise, once I've had this conversation with the BBC, I will do another video and go through with you what the results were of the conversation that I have with the licensing people. And if you, like me, don't watch much BBC at all because you don't appreciate the poor content that the BBC put out, then maybe, just maybe, we can save each other some money. Anyway, if there's anything that you know that I don't, by all means let me know, as always, down below in the comments. Any other queries, questions, suggestions about these kind of videos, down below. I think that's it for this one. I've had a rant enough. I'll give you an idea of what the BBC rip us off for in a year. It was £3.706 billion in income revenue, and then the 157.4 million from BBC worldwide. So that's it for this one. Thanks a lot for watching. I have no doubt that this will spawn a lot of comments from all those out there who do believe that BBC is the greatest thing that was ever created. And in fact, contrary to the licence fee being expunged to history, it should in fact go up every single year by at least 50%, because they give us such good value for money. There will also be those of you who have my view that the BBC should be scrapped or forced to take commercials, and it's obvious that regardless what they say, and they're lying, they are indeed a commercial organisation already, and if they're willing to make money from other ventures, they should be willing to make money from taking commercials. Anyway, that's it for this one. I could rant on forever and a day about that dreadful, hateful, awful organisation. So for now, I'll speak to you again soon. Bye bye.